The room was silent, except for the way she looked at him. No yelling, no tears, just a calm, unblinking gaze that made the man in front of her shift in his chair. He had seen her cry before. He had seen her plead, apologize for things that were not her fault, even take the blame for his own betrayals. But this time, there was nothing. No anger to fight against. No guilt to manipulate. No crack in her eyes he could push through. Carl Jung once wrote that this was the most chilling moment in human psychology. The instant a true empath stops absorbing your pain and starts seeing you with perfect clarity. Because for years, she had been a sponge, taking in every word, every outburst, every lie, holding them in the softest parts of herself until they left bruises no one could see. She had been the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who understood everyone else's wounds but ignored her own. Until now. This was different. Her stillness was not emptiness, it was precision. Every memory, every broken promise, every shift in his voice over the years had been stored. Not in anger, but in a private archive he did not know existed. She had learned the exact shape of his fears, the fault lines in his confidence, the blind spots in his armor, and now she was looking at him the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, not to destroy, but to cut out what did not belong. Jung spent decades studying the people most likely to become society's emotional prey, and what happened the day they turned colder and more dangerous than the predators who once fed on them. He called it a psychological transformation so complete that it permanently changes the way someone sees the world and themselves. Today, we are going to break down exactly what happens in that transformation, the stages, the triggers, and why a cold empath is not just immune to manipulation, but often one step ahead of the manipulator. And if you have ever felt like you see more than you should, you might realize by the end of this video, you are closer to that transformation than you think. For as long as most of us can remember, the cultural image of an empath has been almost painfully predictable, endlessly giving, harmless to a fault, fragile in a way that demands protection rather than respect, the nice one in the group, the peacemaker in the family, the friend who will stay up all night listening, even when their own world is falling apart. It's the version of you that the world praises, but only when it serves them. Because this stereotype, as comforting as it may seem, is also a trap. It's a role written by those who benefit from your silence, a narrative that keeps you pouring out your energy while asking for nothing in return. And somewhere along the way, you're expected to believe that to be a good empath is to be endlessly available, endlessly forgiving, endlessly exploitable. Carl Jung had a different view. In his work on sensitivity, projection, and individuation, he noted that highly sensitive individuals often act as unconscious mirrors for the people around them. You pick up not just moods but motives, not just words but the unspoken tension beneath them. To Jung, this was not weakness. It was advanced perception, a form of consciousness evolution that could, in the right conditions, become one of the most formidable psychological strengths a human being can possess. Here's the paradox that almost no one tells you. The very traits that make you vulnerable in the beginning are the same traits that, once integrated, make you untouchable. Your sensitivity is not the opposite of strength. It's the foundation of a kind of strength most people will never understand, and that's exactly why predators try to suppress it before you realize what it's worth. Think about it. Your ability to sense shifts in tone before a word is spoken, to read micro-expressions, to detect the moment someone's story changes. These are skills that manipulators and narcissists know can dismantle them if they're turned outward instead of inward. So, they teach you to doubt them, to apologize for them, to call them overreactions. They convince you that your emotional radar is a liability, because if you ever learned to trust it, you would see straight through them. And here's the truth. Many empaths spend years in that fog, believing the myth of their own fragility. But when the fog lifts, when you see the story for what it is, everything changes. The same person who once bent under the weight of everyone else's needs becomes someone no one dares to manipulate twice. The gentle empath still exists, but not in the way the stereotype intended. You can care deeply without being controlled. You can give without being emptied. And when you do, you stop fitting into the safe little box society built for you. And you start becoming something far more dangerous to those who would exploit you. a person who chooses where their empathy flows. If you have ever wondered why manipulators and narcissists seem to find you in a crowd, it's not your imagination. And it's not bad luck. It's a psychological pattern. Carl Jung observed that sensitive individuals naturally act as mirrors. You reflect back people's emotions, even the ones they're trying to hide from themselves. And while healthy people may find that comforting, predators see it as an opening, an invitation to project their own pain, shame, and guilt onto someone else. I call this the projection magnet effect. When you're an empath, you don't just pick up moods, you absorb them. To a narcissist, that means they've found the perfect person to carry the weight of their unresolved damage. They can unload without consequence because you'll take it on and even feel responsible for fixing it. And that's just the start. Once a predator knows you'll absorb their chaos, they begin using psychological mechanisms to keep you in place. Gaslighting, the slow erosion of your reality. They deny what happened, twist your words, and plant seeds of doubt until you question your own perception. For an empath who's used to second-guessing their feelings, this is especially effective. Guilt binding, manipulating you into feeling responsible for their behavior. If you really cared, you wouldn't make me angry. After all I've been through, how can you leave me? It reframes your boundaries as cruelty. Emotional labor taxation, constantly requiring you to manage their moods, anticipate their needs, and soothe their insecurities, often at the expense of your own well-being. Maybe you've experienced it in subtle ways. The friend who always calls in crisis but disappears when you need help. The partner who erupts in anger, then blames stress or childhood trauma, and you forgive them. Again. The family member who plays the victim so convincingly that you swallow your frustration to keep the peace. Here's the thing. Predators don't just stumble into empaths' lives. They seek them out because they can feel the difference between someone who will push back and someone who will absorb. And until that dynamic is broken, it repeats, over and over. But here's what they don't see coming. Every word they've said, every manipulation they've used, every inconsistency they've tried to bury, you've noticed, you've stored it, and one day, that mental archive will become the thing that turns the entire game upside down. Because there's a moment, the turning point, when the empath stops using their sensitivity to keep the peace and starts using it to see the truth. That's the moment predators fear the most. Betrayal does not just break trust, it rearranges your entire perception of reality. For most empaths, the slow erosion starts long before the breaking point. You see the little inconsistencies, you feel the shifts in tone, the pauses that hold something unspoken, but you choose hope over certainty. You tell yourself that love means giving the benefit of the doubt, again and again. And then one day, there's no room left for doubt. For Jung, betrayal was the universal catalyst in every empath's transformation. The moment when perception finally outweighed hope. Not a small slight, not a petty argument, but a rupture so deep it forced the psyche into confrontation with its own shadow. Sometimes it was the discovery of infidelity. Sometimes a financial deception, sometimes a hidden double life. Whatever the trigger, it carried the same devastating realization. I saw this coming, and I ignored it. That's the moment everything inside you changes. The first thing to go is the emotional noise. The heart, once racing at every conflict, slows. The flood of feelings that used to cloud every thought suddenly recedes, leaving the mind strangely clear. You notice the details, the way their voice tightens on certain words, the way their eyes flick away when you speak, the way their breathing changes when you hit a nerve. It's as if someone has taken a lens you've carried your whole life and finally brought it into sharp focus. What you feel is not rage, not sadness, it's precision. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Jung described this as a confrontation with the shadow, the moment a person stops denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. For the empath, that shadow isn't malice. It's the intelligence they've been told was overthinking. It's the intuition they've been told was too sensitive. It's the strength they've been told was selfish. In the clarity event, all of those suppressed traits step forward at once, and for the first time, they work together. Predators expect chaos. They expect you to cry, to shout, to beg. They're prepared for emotional warfare. It's the battlefield they know best, What they aren't prepared for is your silence. It's the stillness that makes them nervous, because in that stillness, they realize you've been paying attention all along. Jung wrote that, in this state, the empath's mind operates like a strategist's war room. The years of stored observations are no longer passive memory. They become a map, and with that map, the empath can navigate every interaction with surgical accuracy. This is not revenge. This is not cruelty. This is the end of self-deception. Once you have crossed this threshold, there's no going back to the version of you that tolerated the intolerable. You have seen too much. You've felt the difference between living in a fog and seeing with clarity. And once you know that feeling, you can't unknow it. Jung believed this transformation was irreversible, not because the empath becomes hardened, but because they finally trust their own perception. From that point on, manipulation loses its power, guilt stops being a leash, and the narcissist who once thrived on your compliance finds themselves exposed without you having to raise your voice. If you have ever reached that moment, when the truth became louder than your hope, you know exactly what I'm describing. Write it in the comments. I have had my clarity event. Because in the next section, we're going to pull back the curtain on what happens after that moment, when the empath shifts from absorber to strategist, and why that's the part every manipulator fears the most. When most people think of empathy, they imagine intuition, a mysterious sixth sense, a gut feeling that can't be explained. But for the cold empath, it's not magic, it's memory, it's data. Long before the clarity event, an empath is already collecting information. Every sigh, every pause, every change in tone, every time someone's words don't match their body language, it all gets stored, not consciously, not like a detective with a notebook, but quietly in the background of daily life. Over years, this forms a living archive, a catalog of micro-expressions, speech patterns, emotional triggers, and behavioral inconsistencies. Most of the time, this archive remains dormant. Empaths don't use it because they're busy absorbing, smoothing the edges, holding the peace, protecting others' comfort over their own clarity. Betrayal changes that. When the archive unlocks, the moment of betrayal doesn't just shatter trust, it flips a switch. All the moments you brushed off, all the lies you swallowed, all the gut feelings you talked yourself out of, they rush to the surface in perfect sequence. You don't have to dig for the evidence, it's already there. Every time they deflected blame, every conversation where they forgot what they'd said before, every time their smile came a fraction too late. It's not rage that drives you now, it's recognition. Here's where the cold empath separates from the stereotype. A reactive person shouts their accusations, fueled by the rush of hurt and adrenaline. The manipulator can dismiss that as emotional overreaction and keep the upper hand. But the cold empath doesn't react, they present. The difference is devastating. Instead of emotional chaos, they speak with surgical precision. On this day, you said this. But 2 weeks earlier, you said the opposite. And here's what you did immediately afterward. It's the kind of precision that leaves no room for denial because it's not about feelings anymore. It's about facts. Carl Jung saw this not as vindictiveness, but as integration. In his view, the empath's gift of sensitivity, when combined with their stored observational data, created what he called complete perception. Once they stopped using that perception to excuse others' behavior, they could use it to expose it, calmly, clearly, without the need for emotional escalation. And that's exactly what makes the cold empath more dangerous than the narcissist. They've mastered the narcissist's own game, but without the blind spots of ego or the hunger for control. The narcissist manipulates in the moment. The cold empath has been tracking the entire timeline. If you have ever felt like you just know when someone's lying, or you remember tiny details other people overlook, here's the truth. You're not paranoid, and you're not overly sensitive. You're perceptive. You've been collecting this information for years. You just haven't used it strategically yet. And when you do, that's the moment the dynamic shifts forever. The predator who once used your empathy as a weakness now has to face it as an advantage they can't defend against. When Carl Jung spoke about individuation, he described it as the process of becoming whole, integrating the hidden or denied parts of the self into conscious awareness. For the cold empath, this process follows a very specific sequence, and once you understand these stages, you'll see why their transformation is permanent and why it makes them more dangerous to manipulators than anyone else. I call it the Cold Empath integration model, and it happens in 3 stages. Stage 1, recognition, identifying the shadow. Before the clarity event, most empaths live split in 2. On the surface, they show kindness, patience, and compassion. Beneath, they carry traits they've been taught to bury: anger, intelligence, discernment, and the right to set boundaries. Recognition begins the moment they stop labeling these qualities as flaws. It often starts small, noticing how you replay conversations in your head and realize the subtle manipulations you ignored at the time, feeling anger and understanding that it's not a sign of cruelty, but of self-respect. Recognizing that your intuition isn't overreacting, it's accurate pattern recognition. Micro-test. Think of a recent moment when someone dismissed your feelings. Did you instantly question yourself, or did you quietly register the dismissal as a red flag? If it's the latter, you're already in recognition. Jung believed this stage was the psychic equivalent of turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see the shape of everything that was there all along, and the outlines are sharper than you expected. Stage 2, integration, merging the light and the shadow. Recognition alone isn't enough. In integration, the empath stops keeping their emotional depth and their analytical clarity in separate boxes. The 2 become 1. This is where the transformation accelerates. Instead of choosing between caring and seeing clearly, they realize they can do both at once. They can feel someone's pain without excusing their harmful behavior. They can offer empathy without lowering their boundaries. The mind and the heart begin to work together. Perception informs compassion, and compassion informs action. It's the opposite of what predators expect. They're used to exploiting emotional openness and avoiding analytical scrutiny. But now, those 2 forces are fused. A manipulator tries to guilt you for setting a limit. I guess I just can't count on you anymore. In the past, you'd feel the guilt first, then scramble to fix it. Now, you feel the guilt and instantly recognize it as a tactic. Instead of folding, you respond calmly. My decision stands. No anger, no over-explaining, just clarity with kindness. Notice how often you explain your boundaries. If your explanations are shrinking and your clarity is growing, you're in integration. Stage 3, application, selective empathy as a strategic tool. This is the stage that turns the cold empath into a force predators avoid. Application is the conscious, deliberate use of empathy, not as a reflex, but as a choice. The empath no longer pours themselves into every person or problem. They direct their energy with surgical precision, offering it only where it will be valued, respected, and reciprocated. This is not detachment, it's selectivity, and it changes everything. A toxic coworker tries to pull you into office drama. Instead of engaging to keep the peace, you listen without offering emotional fuel. Your calm disengagement forces them to seek another target. Meanwhile, with a friend who is genuinely struggling, you're fully present, because you know your support will help them grow, not hold them back. In Jung's terms, this is full individuation. The person is no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. They choose their role in every interaction. At the end of the week, look at where your emotional energy went. Was it spread thin across people who drain you, or focused on people who lift you? If you can answer without guilt, you're in application. A narcissist's power does not come from brute force. It comes from finding your blind spots. They scan for the cracks in your self-perception, the places you still question yourself, and they push their way in. It's how they control the narrative, twist your reality, and keep you doubting the truth you already know. But here's the problem. A cold empath has no blind spots left to exploit. Once you've reached full integration, you've confronted every part of yourself that could be used against you. Your anger is no longer shameful, your boundaries are no longer negotiable, and your perception is no longer something you second-guess. The narcissist's playbook relies on you defending yourself against accusations or scrambling to prove your worth. When you no longer need their approval, their entire strategy collapses. And manipulators can sense it. Carl Jung noted what he called the predator's instinct, an unspoken detection system in those who prey on others. Just as a wolf avoids the stag that doesn't run, a manipulator avoids the person who won't feed their ego. They can feel when their hooks won't land, even before a word is exchanged. Imagine this. A narcissistic colleague tries to bait you into defending yourself in a meeting. In the past, you might have rushed to clarify, to smooth things over, to make them feel secure. But now, you meet their accusation with the same calm, unblinking gaze that has become your signature. You neither deny nor over-explain. You simply state the truth once, with precision, and let the silence stretch. They shift in their chair. They feel it, that they no longer have access to you. What once was a game of push and pull is now a brick wall. And here's the part they can't handle. You're not trying to win. You've already won by refusing to play. The cold empath doesn't overpower the narcissist with aggression. They outlast them with clarity. Without emotional chaos to manipulate, the narcissist is left exposed. Every tactic, guilt, flattery, intimidation, falls flat against someone who can see through it in real time. And the most unnerving part for the narcissist? The cold empath's stillness. Predators expect resistance. They're prepared for anger, for tears, for desperate bargaining. They're not prepared for the kind of calm that comes from knowing you can't be touched. This is why the cold empath is more dangerous than the narcissist. The narcissist's power is reactive. It only exists when someone takes the bait. The cold empath's power is self-sustaining. It doesn't need validation, and it doesn't require the other person to change. It's simply there, an unshakable presence that turns the predator's instinct into avoidance. Once you've reached that point, you'll notice the shift. The people who once tested your limits stop trying. The ones who thrived on your compliance drift away. And the ones who respect your boundaries, they stay. Because now, your empathy is no longer a resource to exploit. It's a gift you choose to give. Carl Jung admired the transformation of the integrated empath, but he also feared it. Not because they became cruel, but because the power they unlocked could so easily be turned in the wrong direction. When an empath reaches full integration, they gain a kind of psychological vision most people will never experience. They can read a person's motives in seconds. They can sense emotional pressure points without asking a single question. And if they chose to, they could use that insight to control and dismantle another person's reality as easily as they were once controlled themselves. That's the shadow side of this transformation. And it's the reason Jung believed ethics mattered as much as awakening. Because the same clarity that can heal can also destroy. Imagine an integrated empath who decides to fight fire with fire. Instead of protecting themselves, they use their perception to corner and humiliate. Instead of setting boundaries, they weaponize them to punish. Instead of simply exposing lies, they engineer situations to provoke them. In the wrong hands, this gift becomes indistinguishable from the manipulator's arsenal, only sharper and more effective. This is the crossroads every awakened empath eventually reaches. Do you use your power to heal or to harm? Healing doesn't mean forgiving everyone or letting injustice pass. It means choosing your battles with purpose, refusing to waste energy on revenge that leaves you empty. It means using your insight to strengthen yourself and the people who deserve to stand beside you, not to break others for the satisfaction of proving you can. Harm is easy. Legacy is harder. Jung warned that without ethical grounding, an awakened empath could become as dangerous as the predators they once feared, but with far more precision. And that's why this choice defines the rest of your life after transformation. Because the path you choose doesn't just shape you, it ripples outward, into your relationships, your community, even your family's next generation. A cold empath who uses their clarity for integrity becomes the example predators avoid and honest people admire. One who uses it for dominance becomes something else entirely, feared but also hollow. If you've reached this point, you already know what you're capable of. The question is no longer whether you can win. It's whether the way you win will be worth remembering. A cold empath does not just change themselves. They change the systems around them, and the shift is rarely quiet. In families, the pattern is almost predictable. The person who used to absorb everyone's tension stops doing it, and the dynamic either collapses or restructures entirely. The sibling who relied on guilt to get their way finds it no longer works. The parent who used emotional manipulation to maintain control suddenly faces silence where compliance used to be. The family has two options: evolve into healthier interactions or fracture under the weight of unaddressed truth. In workplaces, the transformation is just as disruptive. Office politics thrive on the unspoken, the half-truths, alliances, and undercurrents that keep certain people in control. But When a cold empath refuses to play, it forces others to reveal their intentions openly. The manipulator, who once maneuvered behind the scenes, finds their tactics ineffective. Projects run cleaner, conversations become more direct. And while some resent it, others quietly start modeling the same clarity. Communities feel it too, even without knowing why. The cold empath doesn't make dramatic speeches or public challenges. Their presence alone changes the temperature of a room. People who operate with integrity feel safer because they know they won't be undermined in the shadows. Those who rely on subtle control and hidden agendas begin to keep their distance, sensing they can't spin their stories without being seen through. Jung believed this ripple effect was inevitable. Once a person's perception becomes unclouded, they become a living mirror, reflecting back the truth of others without judgment, but without distortion. That reflection forces choices. Some will rise to meet it, others will run from it. And the most striking part, the cold empath rarely has to say a word to make it happen. The transformation that started as personal survival becomes something larger, a catalyst for truth. Not truth as a weapon, but truth as a constant presence, the kind that quietly demands everything around it to either grow stronger or reveal its weakness. If you've ever seen a relationship, a workplace, or even a friendship group shift simply because you stopped playing your old role, you've already witnessed this ripple. And in the next section, we'll bring it full circle, closing the loop on the transformation and asking the question that will define what you do with it. From the beginning, this has never just been about them. The narcissists, the manipulators, the ones who believed you'd never see through their game. It's been about you, about the moment you stop being defined by the roles you were handed and start defining yourself. We began with that silent gaze, the one that made the predator in the room shift in their seat. That moment wasn't just a reaction. It was the birth of something different, something unshakable. But here's the question that matters now. When your moment comes, will you control the transformation, or will you let it control you? Because the truth is, once it begins, you can't go back. The cold empath isn't a costume you take off. It's the integration of every lesson, every betrayal, every pattern you've ever seen. And with it comes a choice, one that will echo in every interaction you have from this day forward. Some will use that clarity to heal, to protect others from what they've survived. Others will let the shadow take the wheel, turning power into poison. Jung warned us about this crossroads. He knew that the gift of vision always came with the temptation to weaponize it. So, maybe the real measure of transformation isn't if you change, but how you choose to live after you do. If you've made it this far into this conversation, it means you already see more than most. Say it out loud. Type it in the comments so it becomes real. I see everything. I choose where to look. And if this spoke to something deep in you, stay in the circle. Not because I asked, but because this is where the people who see through the noise find each other. The more of us there are, the harder it becomes for the old games to survive. The transformation is coming. Maybe for you, maybe for someone you love. When it does, be ready to choose.